Welcome to the North Carolina DOT NEVI Industry Webinar number 2. My name is Heather Hildebrandt, and with me today is my colleague Paula Hemmer. We work for the Office of Strategic Initiatives and Program Support. We are part of the core team implementing the NEVI program for NCDOT. The information being shared today is correct to the best of North Carolina DOT's knowledge. NEVI is a program that is new for North Carolina DOT. As a result, NCDOT may need to change the timelines and processes we discuss in this presentation. NCDOT will provide these updates through the project website and via emails to the listserv addresses. Should any changes be made to the actual RFP documents, those will be disclosed through an RFP addendum posted to our website, as we noted in our first webinar. Here are some disclaimers. Verbal or audio recorded questions regarding the RFP will not be addressed. All questions are to be submitted via the NEVI website. Applicants shall not contact any other NCDOT personnel, consultants, or agents regarding this RFP from the date of advertisement, which was last Monday, until an award is issued by NCDOT. Violation of this section by an applicant may be grounds for rejecting an application from that applicant. NCDOT reserves the right to amend this RFP at any time by addendum. If the addendum is issued after the closing date for receipt of applications, NCDOT may, at its sole discretion, allow applicants to amend their project applications in response to this addendum. The applicants shall acknowledge all addendums in writing per the instructions included in the addenda. Failure to review and acknowledge all addenda may be grounds for rejection of an application and may be deemed unresponsive. Any person requiring the RFP in an alternate format or requiring a special accommodation due to a disability should contact the North Carolina Department of Office of Civil Rights. These will be provided at no cost. Assistance should be requested at least 5 business days prior to the activity or action for which the assistance is needed. Today we are going to cover the following topics: NEVI overview and our goals for the program, a tour of the request for proposal package with some important highlights for applicants, applicant cost and eligibility, how to apply for our NEVI program, how we will evaluate the applications we receive, GIS cluster information, and finally, our timeline for awards and post-award information. We strongly encourage you to listen to this presentation in its entirety. NEVI is a brand new program for North Carolina, the first of its kind. To orient you, I'm going to briefly go over the basics of the National NEVI program and provide an overview of the goals of our program here in North Carolina. The National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program was authorized under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in November of 2021. Congress provided a combined $5 billion in formula funding to state DOTs to implement a nationwide charging network that is open to the public. North Carolina will receive approximately $109 million in total over federal fiscal years 2022 through 2026. The purpose of the National NEVI program is to provide dedicated funding to construct an electric vehicle charging infrastructure network across the country. The NEVI program will adhere to several goals identified by North Carolina. The first is to fund the deployment of infrastructure to strategically support the development of convenient, accessible, reliable, and equitable EV charging stations along the designated corridors. To grow a local diverse workforce for installing and repairing the charging infrastructure. And finally, all federally funded projects seek to meet Justice 40 criteria. Justice 40 is a federal goal that 40% of all program benefits flow to disadvantaged communities. North Carolina's RFP will allow the state to select sites along the best value approach. The RFP process is open to everyone, and we encourage participation from disadvantaged communities. These federal requirements that are shown on this slide are fully discussed in the RFP package and in reference documents. Funding for any agreement resulting from this RFP will be paid from NEVI formula funds. The awardee will be required to provide at least a 20% contribution, the applicant cost share, to the overall project costs that are authorized by an agreement between the awardee and NCDOT. All applicable requirements of Title 23 U.S. Code of Federal Regulations and Title II CFR Part 200 apply to the administration of these funds, which include, but are not limited to, 23 CFR Part 680, the Davis-Bacon Act, FHWA Form 1273, the Americans with Disability Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Build America, Buy America Act. In addition to these requirements, the awardee must comply with all other standards and requirements that may be required by federal, state, and local laws. Projects funded under any agreement resulting from this RFP will be covered by the Build America, Buy America implementation plan to enhance Buy America for electric vehicle chargers. The federal NEVI rule uses very specific set of definitions for the terms that are shown here that specify the requirements for charging stations. Several of these terms are often used interchangeably in other contexts, but within the NEVI program, they have a distinct and specific meanings. Charger is a term that encompasses all the equipment needed to supply power to electric vehicles. Most of the NEVI technical requirements are defined in terms of ports, where one port is a system within a charger that supports charging of a single electric vehicle. A connector is the device that plugs into a vehicle to charge it. There may be multiple connector types that are available for a given charging port. NCDOT's NEVI program requires 2 connector types at each port, a CCS and a NACS connector. Cluster is an NCDOT term referring to a specific range of exits or crossroads along an alternate fuel corridor where an applicant can propose to construct a NEVI-compliant charging station. Here's a graphical representation of the relationship between a charging station, chargers, ports, and connectors. This charging station has 3 chargers. There are 2 single-port chargers and 1 dual-port charger in the middle, for a total of 4 ports, the minimum required by NEVI. Each port in the graphic has 2 connectors. 3 of the ports have a single cabled connector and an adapter for the second connector. One of the ports in the middle right has 2 separate cables for 2 connectors. Since the 2 separate cables are part of a single port, it would not be possible to charge 2 vehicles at the same time with those connectors. This slide discusses the station location and access requirements under NEVI. The NEVI program requires building out of a fast charging network along all federally designated EV alternative fuel corridors, or AFCs. North Carolina has 10 alternative fuel corridors, which can be seen on the GIS map that was developed by NCDOT on the NEVI website. NEVI requires charging stations be located no more than 50 miles apart on each corridor. It also requires that stations be no more than 1 mile driving distance from these corridors. Stations must also be available for charging at all times, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. The stations must be available to the general public and not require a membership to use. At least 1 port must be accessible to disabled customers. NCDOT issued specific requirements for accessible ports in Section 1.5 of Attachment 1, Technical Requirements. This slide discusses power requirements under NEVI. Each charging station must provide at least 4 charging ports. Additional ports are allowed. Each port must be capable of providing 150 kilowatts per port simultaneously. This means that a minimum total power available at the NEVI charging station must be at least 600 kilowatts. Stations that have more than 4 ports would require even more power to meet this requirement. The NEVI program allows power sharing between ports, but a minimum of 150 kilowatts must be available to each port at all times. The NCDOT RFP requires that each of the 4 ports provide both a CCS connector and a NACS connector. This ensures maximum compatibility with vehicles. This RFP is for round 1 of the funding for NEVI implementation in North Carolina. NCDOT anticipates releasing additional rounds in the future. The RFP is a competitive selection process. The RFP is focused on design, construction, acquisition, installation, operations, maintenance, and ownership of EV chargers at locations near the interstate system. NCDOT will not own, operate, or maintain any charging equipment. Instead, NCDOT is looking for partners who will own, operate, and maintain the equipment for a minimum of 5 years. Achieving full build-out of the alternate fuel corridors or North Carolina is expected to require installation of approximately 37 charging stations to meet the 50-mile spacing along the corridors. The general location of these stations are identified in clusters of interchanges or crossroads. These clusters were selected to optimize an efficient build-out of the alternate fuel corridor charging network within North Carolina. This RFP Round 1 funding focuses in on 11 of the 37 clusters. NCDOT anticipates awarding a single site within each of the 11 clusters as part of the RFP. Each applicant may only submit a single application per cluster, but applicants may apply for as many different clusters as they would like. Federal NEVI program funds can be used for up to 80% of the total eligible project costs. The applicant must provide at least 20% of the total eligible costs. However, applicants may propose a higher cost share amount as part of their application. For instance, a 70% reimbursement and a 30% match.
Now we will review the contents of the RFP package. Some of this information was provided in the first webinar held on April 1st. Next slide, please. All RFP documents and related RFP information can be found at the NCDOT NEVI website. This website has just been posted in the chat. The Download NEVI RFP Packet button will automatically download all of the files you need for the RFP application. They will be placed into your download folder on your computer. There are 9 total documents, the RFP and the 8 attachments listed here. The first document is the North Carolina NEVI RFP. This document outlines the goals and priorities for the program, program eligibility, project requirements, how to apply, the scoring criteria, and evaluation process, and the pre-award and post-award activities. The second document is attachment 1 to the RFP, the technical requirements. This document outlines both federal requirements and additional state level requirements that must be included in the project. We want to highlight a few important technical requirements. The first requirement is 1.1 distance from the AFC. The project site shall be within a maximum driving distance of 1 mile from the AFC. It should be noted that for clusters M1, M2, and M4, proposed sites must be within 1 driving mile of both AFCs, as indicated in the RFP. If the proposed project site is 1.01 miles, it is too far and will not be considered compliant with the requirements. NCDOT has provided this distance on its GIS mapping website. Another important requirement is 2.6, connectors. Each DCFC port must have a CCS Type 1 connector and a permanently attached NACS connector. This connector can either be a separate cable or an adapter. Power sharing between these two connectors so that they can be used at the same time would mean that these are actually 2 different ports. Power sharing between connectors cannot drop the power on either connector below 150 kilowatts. The third requirement of note is 2.8 minimum power supply. The utility feed to the project site shall have a minimum power capacity of at least 150 kilowatts per port, and the charger shall have an input power rating of at least 150 kilowatts per port. If the proposed project does not meet this requirement, it will be considered non-compliant. The final requirement of note is 2.5, output current limit. The output current may be the lower of 350 amps or the current required to reach 150 kilowatts based on the output voltage. All ports must be capable of outputting a minimum of 350 amps and must be capable of operating at least one point on the line that is shown in Figure 1. All charging ports shall be capable of providing a continuous power output of at least 150 kilowatts simultaneously from each charging point at the charging station. Chargers shall be capable of providing DC output voltages somewhere within the range of 250 to 920 volts. If the proposed project does not meet this requirement, it will be considered non-compliant. The third document in the RFP is Attachment 2, Scope of Work and Deliverables. The scope of work identifies the tasks, schedule, and deliverables required of each grantee that has signed an agreement with NCDOT to receive funding. Tasks include preliminary engineering, final design and permitting, construction and commissioning, operations and maintenance, reporting requirements. I think we need to go to the next slide, actually, Heather. There we go. No? Okay, maybe not. Operations and maintenance, reporting requirements, and project closeout. After confirmation of the successful completion of each task, NCDOT will issue a notice to proceed to the next task. Attachment 3, 4, and 6 are all components of the RFP that must be submitted with each application. Attachment 3 is the technical application form, and it must be submitted for each proposed project. It should be a Word document, not a PDF. Website if you have a section of attachment 3 application form, technical application form, and provide all required 40 pages. How they allocate space in completing each section of the form within the 40 pages used and will not. A couple of specific items to note in the technical application form. I believe we need to go forward one. On page 18 of the form is section 18, Administrative Responsiveness Check. This list serves as a checklist for you to confirm that you have included or appropriately addressed each of the items within the application. Remember to check either the yes or no box next to each requirement, confirming if you have met the requirement, as well as including the document and application page number where confirmation of the requirement can be found. A second checklist that must also be completed in a similar manner is on pages 19 and 20, section 19, Technical Responsiveness Check. If either of these checklists are not completed, the application may be considered non-compliant. If your application does not meet each of these requirements, the application may be considered non-compliant. Page 21 of the application includes a summary list of all the items that must be included in the application, including the additional documents and several signatures that must be provided with attachment 3. If any of these documents or signatures is not provided, the application may be considered non-compliant. Each application must also include a completed attachment for the cost proposal form. Applicants are to enter information only in the yellow cells. The formatting and formulas are not to be adjusted. After information is entered into the yellow boxes, the other boxes will automatically be populated according to formulas in the cost proposal form. The cost proposal requires applicants to include cost for each individual line item. If no cost is anticipated for a particular line item, 0 should be entered. There is a cost line labeled Other in each cost category. If a proposed cost does not fit appropriately into the provided line item labels, it could be entered into the Other cell. A description of this cost must be provided in the corresponding description cell. There are a couple of cost items that can be included in either capital cost or the O&M costs. These include costs of the charger and warranties for the charger. This is to accommodate different business models such as leasing. The operation and maintenance cost must also be provided for each individual line item and for each year of O&M. Applicants must also provide their requested reimbursement percentage. There are percentages for both capital and O&M costs. The maximum amount you can request is 80% of the total cost. These percentages will determine the amount NCDOT will reimburse you for this project. Attachments 5 and 7 are additional documents that are not part of the application process. These documents are part of the post-award process and are provided at this time to give applicants clarity on the requirements that awardees will have to comply with. The draft agreement provides the draft terms and conditions of the agreement between NCDOT and awardees. Please review this document thoroughly so you understand all of the requirements and legal obligations of being awarded a project under this RFP. A letter of credit is required to be provided by an awardee prior to executing the project agreement. NCDOT has included an example letter of credit, so applicants have a sample of the type of language NCDOT will want to see in this letter. The Utility Data Request Form is a tool for applicants to request site-specific information from the utility that is providing power to the charging station. The information collected in this form can then be used by the applicant to inform their application and cost proposal submission to NCDOT. Note that agreements between the applicant, site host, and the utility for utility service upgrades are not required for the application process. The NEVI RFP Requirements and Resources button downloads key reference information and functions for the program to assist applicants. In addition to thoroughly reviewing all RFP package documents, applications are strongly urged to conduct their own due diligence using the resources that we have provided as it relates to the NEVI formula program and the federal, state, and local laws that apply to this funding. Remember to use this button to keep informed on changes to our timeline.
Before reviewing how to apply, we will discuss eligibility of applicants and costs. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, for-profit businesses, privately owned electric utilities, nonprofit organizations, governmental entities, tribal nations, utilities, teaming partnerships that include the above eligible entities with clear primary applicant and point of contact. Ineligible applicants include entities or individuals that are currently suspended or debarred by the state of North Carolina or the federal government. For the purpose of this RFP, a project site is defined as a location where one or more charging stations are located. A project site may contain both a NEVI charging station and a non-NEVI charging station. NEVI charging stations must be compliant with 23 CFR 680 and the entirety requirements contained in this RFP. Applications will be evaluated on the NEVI charging stations and related amenities as outlined in this RFP. Awardees will be reimbursed for only NEVI charging station related costs and required utility upgrades per this RFP. Eligible costs include both new charging stations as well as upgrades to existing charging stations. The RFP provides full details of eligible costs, but here is a highlight of some eligible capital costs under this program. In general, eligible capital costs are those directly related to the EV charging station. To be considered directly related to the operation of an EVSE station, an item must be a necessary component of the EVSE station operation, be necessary component to connect the EVSE charging station to an electricity source, or to supply power from the electricity source, enable management of electricity demand or backup of available if applicable, provide eligible signage to direct EVs to the charging station, or provide information to electric vehicle users about the usage of the charging station. Non-eligible project costs are the responsibility of the applicant. The RFP contains examples of eligible capital costs, which are listed here. One eligible cost that we want to highlight is the cost of any shared equipment that supports both NEVI and non-NEVI ports. The cost for the shared equipment is prorated based on the proportion of the power rating of the equipment that can supply the NEVI ports simultaneously. Listed here are eligible operations and maintenance costs. It should be noted that costs for electricity use and electricity demand charges over the 5-year operations and maintenance periods are considered eligible costs under our program. There are a few highlights on ineligible costs we want to note. Costs incurred prior to a fully executed agreement with NCDOT are ineligible. Cost of any equipment that supports only non-NEVI ports is also ineligible. And cost for any level 2 chargers at the station is not eligible.
Another resource provided on the NCDOT NEVI website is a GIS-based map of the RFP charging clusters. This is a brief overview of the mapping functions. NCDOT stepped through the mapping in our first NEVI industry webinar held on April 1st. Hopefully you are already familiar with our link to the GIS-based map of the NEVI clusters. It provides the specific stretches along the alternative fuel corridors where we plan to construct stations, only for the 11 clusters funded in round 1. We will now go through the functionality of the map. This slide shows the homepage for the map. You can zoom in on specific areas to see the clusters. As you can see, each cluster is also provided on the bottom of the map as a quick way to zoom in to a particular cluster. You will need to scroll to the right to see all of the clusters. Note that the map layers can be turned on and off using a drop-down menu located in the top left-hand corner. This slide shows a specific cluster and the level of detail you can see when you zoom in close. The purple lines are street level data, indicating that this part of the street is within the 1-mile driving distance from the AFC. This map also shows the floodplain layer turned on for this cluster, shown in blue. Now we will review how to download addendums, ask questions, and submit an application to NCDOT. Prior to applying, applicants should review any NCDOT issued addendums, as was discussed in the webinar held on April 1st. There is now a button on the website to download addendums, shown here next to the red arrow. NCDOT will issue addendums to the RFP as necessary to correct or clarify language in the RFP documents. It is the responsibility of applicants to download and read all addendums, sign an acknowledgement of the addendums, and submit this acknowledgement with your RFP application package. The next button we are discussing is Submit a NEVI RFP Questions. This is a multi-purpose form, therefore we need to give a few directions. First, it asks you to give your contact information. The key field for this RFP is the question comment field. We ask that you give us some qualifying text to let us know what part of the process you need help with. If you have a question on the RFP documents, please include the document number, section number, and page number related to your question. RFP questions will be accepted through April 29th at 5 p.m. Please read the entire RFP before submitting any questions. If you have any problems uploading documents, please include the words application submission issue. If you need to withdraw and amend your application, please include the words withdraw/amend application. Requests for help with submissions and withdrawals will be allowed throughout the RFP period. NCDOT provides a running list of the answers to the submitted questions so that all applicants can be informed. We will publish the answers every Friday in a PDF linked to the Download Responses to Submitted Questions button shown next to the red arrow. Here is the first page of the responses we posted on Friday. Notice the action field. If a question results in an action on the part of NCDOT, it will be listed here. NCDOT may issue an addendum to the RFP based on a submitted question. Once your application is complete, you can upload complete application documents using the NEVI website upload button. This button was discussed at length in the first NEVI industry webinar held on April 1st. It opens an NCDOT form that asks for some key information: the business name under which you are applying, the name of the cluster for which you are applying via a drop-down box, information on the person acting as the application contact. The form also provides a checklist of these items that you will need to upload. The second image on the right is the lower portion of the same form. This part of the form gives information on the files that can be uploaded, such as the number of files that can be submitted, the maximum size for the combined files, and allowable file types such as PDF, Excel, JPEG, Word, and zip files. All the files that you are attaching to the application should be uploaded at one time. Lastly, there is an acknowledgement box to check that you have done all your homework prior to submitting an application. Then you can hit the Submit button at the bottom of the form. If you have trouble submitting files, you can contact us using the link provided in the form and include the words submission issue as discussed previously. Once NCDOT receives your application, it will sit in a holding area until the close of the RFP period. Then it will be formally sent to the NEVI application manager to begin a multi-step evaluation process. Step 1 is the responsiveness check. All applications will be reviewed for responsiveness to confirm the application meets the RFP requirements. The responsiveness check is a two-step pass-fail assessment. The first step is an administrative responsiveness check. This includes checks for things like making sure all forms are complete, in the correct format, and signed. Applications that fail the administrative responsiveness check will be determined to be non-responsive and will not be evaluated further. If an applicant or application fails to meet one or more of the requirements detailed in Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, it may be determined to be non-responsive. The second step is a technical responsiveness check. This includes checks to ensure that the proposed equipment and site meet the minimum technical requirements of the NEVI program and the RFP. Applications that fail the technical responsiveness check will be determined to be non-responsive and will not be evaluated further. If an applicant or application fails to meet one or more of the requirements detailed in Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, it may be determined to be non-responsive. All requirements can be found in Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, and in the NEVI requirements detailed in Title 23 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 680. NCDOT will establish a review committee made up of no less than 3 members to score applications that are deemed responsive. Applications will be scored individually by each review committee member according to the scoring criteria and point maximums provided in this table. The total score for the technical part is 175 points. A more detailed breakdown of this scoring criteria is included in section 6.1 of the RFP. The reimbursement cost of each application is scored using a formula. The formula for the cost score is presented here. An application cost is evaluated against the lowest reimbursement amount requested by an applicant in that cluster. The maximum cost proposal score is 25 points. The total score will be calculated by adding the technical score to the cost score. The maximum total cost is 200 points. The total scores from applications within the same cluster are compared by the review committee. The highest scoring application within each cluster will be selected for a conditional award. The review committee will forward these recommendations to the NCDOT NEVI Steering Committee, who will make the final decision on the conditional awards. NCDOT may select applicants that meet the requirements and provide the best value to receive a conditional award that has been recommended by the review committee and approved by the steering committee. NCDOT will notify selected applicants of their award and will post the intent to award on the NCDOT NEVI website shown here. NCDOT reserves the right to not award to any of the 11 sites during this time. And note that NCDOT will first conditionally award applications meeting the requirements and providing the best value. This award is conditional until NEPA clearance has been achieved and all required items have been submitted and approved by NCDOT.
Moving on to our timeline associated with the RFP and evaluation process. Our major dates are included on this slide, along with where you can find additional details about each element. The question period is from April 8th to the 29th. The applications will be due to us by June 10th, with a conditional award anticipated 90 days after that. Note that North Carolina DOT is not bound to these timelines and may take more time to conduct the NEPA clearance process and obtain appropriate authorizations from the Federal Highway Administration. We will now share some post-award information. After the notice of conditional award, there are several requirements that awardees must meet prior to execution of the final project agreement. One of these is the NEPA clearance prior to the execution of agreement. NCDOT will conduct the NEPA review for each of the conditionally awarded sites. The conditional awardee must provide support to NCDOT through the NEPA approval process. Any site that is unable to achieve NEPA clearance through a categorical exclusion may have their conditional award rescinded by NCDOT. Execution of agreement. The applicant shall sign the project agreement within 45 calendar days of achieving NEPA clearance and receipt of the project agreement. At the time of execution of the project agreement, the applicant shall provide the following documents: a signed host agreement between the applicant and the site host business owner. The site host agreement must include details outlined in sections 5.2.3. A signed letter from the utility. The signed letter from the utility shall confirm the utility will provide electrical service to the applicant at the proposed site. A letter of credit. NCDOT will provide a sample letter of credit. The applicant letter of credit shall include similar language to the sample provided and have an effective date no sooner than the date of execution of the project agreement. The letter of credit shall be provided for an amount equal to 60% of the maximum total project reimbursement. This amount can be lowered after each successful year of operation. Proof of registration to do business in North Carolina. All applicants shall provide proof of registration to do business in North Carolina and cannot be debarred. And then any additional documentation. Applicants shall provide any additional certificates or documents deemed necessary by NCDOT. As a reminder, NCDOT would like to make an important point regarding costs. We've mentioned this already once on this webinar, but applicants cannot incur or agree to pay any costs to be requested for reimbursement prior to the execution of the agreement. This is very important. Section 7 of the RFP contains detailed information on the reimbursement at all stages of the project. We present a brief overview of the reimbursement schedule here. Invoicing and proof of payment is required. Capital reimbursement will occur after the station is constructed and commissioned. NCDOT will withhold 25% of this reimbursement to use as an operations performance incentive. Each year, NCDOT will pay out 20% of this withheld amount if all performance requirements and obligations are met. Operations and maintenance costs will be reimbursed annually. However, if the 97% uptime performance requirement is not met, NCDOT will reduce this reimbursement as specified in Section 7. NCDOT will issue a final payment after the 5-year period of performance is completed. This final payment may be reduced should the station be profitable beyond the maximum return on investment of 25%. Per Section 7.5 of the RFP, the awardee is not allowed to make more than a reasonable return on investment on the charging station. This applies only to the income received from EV charging. Reasonable return on investment on the charging station is determined by the state as being no more than 25% of the annual profit on the project. Additional details are in Section 7.5 of the RFP. This concludes our presentation of the NEVI RFP website and proposal process. We hope that the RFP process is clear at this point. We will be posting this webinar to our NCDOT YouTube channel, which is in the chat box. A link is provided below. We look forward to seeing your applications, and if you have any additional questions after reviewing this presentation and the RFP, please submit them via the NEVI RFP website. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.